What is the secret to making sustainable changes, habits in your life, and actually succeeding at it? This is Rejuvenated Women, Impeccable Health for High Performing Women, episode 46. And today I want to dive into, we're in this new year. Everyone's making changes and has goals and has commitments that they've made. And the reality is, I looked this up the other day, only 8% of people actually make it through a full year of making a New Year's resolution. And what research has shown, there's lots of research around what it really takes to change a habit, to, create something new, to transform a piece of yourself or a part of yourself in some way. And what it's shown is that it takes an average of 66 days. And the majority of people who have a New Year's resolution or something that they're trying to do that's new, and typically, it's health related, but it can be in any area of life, typically that takes, most people fall off of that, like 80% of people fall off of that within the first month. So we're not even getting to the point where you can truly make a new habit and have it just become ingrained in you to do something. And, a lot of this thought process has come up in two ways for me over the last couple of weeks. Number one, we have a new puppy that I've been potty training, which is, teaching a dog habits of going potty outside has been, giving me perspective on like, okay, how do you train a dog? And then how do we train ourselves? Because honestly, a lot of the things that apply to training the dog, creating a reward system and getting him in the habit of asking to go outside and only going potty outside, like all that stuff, we have to do that with ourselves on some level. And the other piece that has brought out this thought process for me has been, I've been reading the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. And if you've never read the book, just go to Amazon, download the thing, read it, order it, whatever you want to do. It's an amazing book. But what I really love about the conversation that he has inside of that book that I wanted to talk about on this episode today is how our habits and our identity are linked, and to really truly transform something about our life, to transform our health or our weight or our business or our, marriage, whatever it is, we have to come at it from the perspective of our identity. Because to really truly be successful, it comes down to actually recreating our identity or becoming the type of person that would have the result that we're trying to achieve. And so the best way I could think about to really discuss this is, talking about a previous chapter in my life from like 12 years ago now, when I was in my mid-20s and I decided to run a marathon. And I didn't just decide like, oh, I'm going to go run a marathon and then, start running. I'd already been building up to that. But, in doing so, I had to embrace some changes in my identity. I had to become the grad student who got up at 7 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday to go for a long run. And the long run could be anywhere from 12 to 20 miles. I, had to become the person who went to bed on time and cared about what I put in my body and, went out of my way to take care of myself physically so that I was able to perform that way. And I really had to embrace the being the runner, right? Like being the long distance runner and being the marathon trainer. And I admit, like I was in great shape. I could run 20 miles at a sub 8-minute mile pace. I was, I really embraced this, but there was a shift that had to come, from being, so many of us go into different goals or different things, with a sprint mentality. It's like, okay, how can I get there as fast as possible? And the reality is, like, it takes time. It took me, I think, probably 6 months, and that was post training for a half marathon first, to really become like train my body to the point where it could run 26.2 miles and do it mostly healthfully. I did get injured during the final race that I did, but we have to embrace being someone new and then making decisions and creating habits based on that new person. So, I really took on like being kind of a high level athlete at that point. I had to really be intentional with what I was doing with my body. And unfortunately for me, that meant I let go of some things like being a really good student and had some trouble in school that quarter. I was in chiropractic school at the time. But you have to think about, whatever your big goal, so for so many of us, it's okay, I want to lose weight this year. Well, you have to look at the identity of the person who is the weight that you want to be. What What choices do they make? What habits do they have? What do they do? They probably aren't going to, the freezer for ice cream every single night, and they're probably not stopping for Starbucks on the way home, or whatever it is. Like, there's habits that we have ingrained in ourselves that have gotten us to where we're at, and we identify in some way with that. And so we really have to work on shifting. It's not so much about the actions you take as it is about understanding who it is you're trying to become and who it is that has that result that you're looking for. And the other piece I wanted to share about this is so many of us will set these goals or resolutions, or whatever it is, for our health, for our life, and those aren't bad things. I'm not saying don't do that. Like, we I'm a big proponent and firmly believe that we're always growing, and we're always moving towards the next thing, and we're always experiencing what that shifts in who we are and how we're being and all of that stuff to get us there. But what we want to really be aware of, why a lot of people will maybe hit a result and then fall off the wagon. And this was my experience with marathon training. So, I became marathon runner, and did all that stuff, and took on all the habits that I needed to do in order to do that successfully. And I did it. But then it was like I achieved the result, and it was like, well, what's next? And I hadn't really thought beyond, like, I'm going to do this one thing, right? So we're driven by that big result, but we fail to look long term. Like, okay, what does this mean for me long term? And what running that marathon meant for me long term was I was in fantastic shape. My cardiovascular health was amazing, but my body was shot. My legs were shot. I ended up with bursitis in my hip. I decided to try a triathlon to just give my legs a rest from all the pounding, and was too injured to even get through with that. And so I ultimately uncreated my identity as a long distance athlete, and took on other ways of being physically active that are more sustainable in the long term. And I'm not trying to discourage anyone from running a marathon. I would just recommend that if you do so, you have absolutely no other outside stress in your life that's severe, because if you do, you will end up injured and hurting yourself more. But we've talked about that on previous episodes, so we won't go there right now. But you have to look at whatever your big goal is for this year, or whatever resolutions you hold. Like, who do you have to become, and then what's the long-term impact of that? Like, how do you make it something that's just a part of who you are in the future, and not something that you try, you get a result, and then it's like, well, what's next? And there's no real transformational process that happens in there, right? So we really have to embrace in full a shift in our identity. And sometimes you shift away. I can think of so many times when I've recreated who I am, or how I do it in certain things, especially around physical exercise and activity. Like, these days I'm into yoga, and that's cool. And I love it. But I've been the soccer player, and I've been the runner, and the cross country skier. And there's things that I still love, but it's not tied so tightly to our identity. So I'm a little bit just kind of running all over the place with this, but the two things I wanted you to really think about in this is, who do you have to be to become or achieve the result that you're trying to achieve? And the other piece of that, like, is that a future that you want to be living into? Like, is that realistic, sustainable for you? And if not, we can shift our goals. That's totally fine. But you really want to be more attached to all the steps that you have to take, and the things that you are not as attached to that, like every little thing that you have to do, and more focused on the big picture of, like, okay, who do I have to be to get there? And then those things start to naturally occur and come into place. And you have to, there's less focus on all the little things that you have to do, or, the focus isn't so much on that result as it is around your identity and who you are. So hopefully this makes sense, helps serve you. It was just some kind of a different perspective to bring to the whole conversation of habit change and transformation, and especially around our health, because so many of us try to take on something new related to health, whether it's moving every day, or losing a bunch of weight, or, finally getting your hormones balanced, and all of those things. And so you have to look at, who do I need to be? And hopefully that makes sense. Who we show up and be in the world can change and be different, right? And so, we really have to take on embracing something new a lot of times. So check out the book. I get nothing for this. I just love this book, Atomic Habits by James Clear. And coming up in the next couple of weeks, we're gonna, be diving into some more interviews, and just kind of continuing this conversation, Because a lot of transformational change when it comes to our health, when it comes to our life, all of that, it comes down to identity. It comes down to mindset. It comes down to doing some tough work to let go of the things that don't serve you into the future that you're moving into, and really helping you actually create that future. And that's where, a lot of the work I do comes into play, and there's a lot of tools and resources out there, but they're not necessarily the things that are like lose weight in 21 days. That's not really helping serve us in the long term of helping you really embrace something new about yourself and be able to sustain it into the future. And that's what I'm all about. So hopefully this serves you and is helpful as you continue to, work on whatever it is that you're working on in this new year. And I'm advocating for everyone who's listening to this show and, in our Facebook group and all of those things actually succeeds in making it at least the 66 days you need to truly create a new habit that, just becomes ingrained in you as a part of who you are, and that we don't, fall off the wagon and lose it. So we will see you next week.